Gary was in the cave when Rex burst in holding a newspaper. The headline said the government had printed 2 trillion new meteors overnight. Rex asked Gary if that meant everyone was rich now. Gary put down his banana very slowly. He told Rex to sit down. Chapter 1. The Banana Problem. Gary started with a story Rex already knew. Last year there was one banana tree in the jungle. 100 bananas. Everyone wanted them. A banana cost 10 meteors. That was the price. Supply and demand. Rex remembered this from before. Then Gary found 10 more trees. 1,000 bananas now existed. Nobody was willing to pay 10 meteors for a banana anymore. The price dropped to 1 meteor. The banana did not change. The number of bananas changed. And that changed everything. Rex nodded. He had heard this part before. Gary said now replace bananas with meteors. And replace the banana tree with a government printing machine. When there are more meteors chasing the same amount of goods, each meteor buys less. That is inflation. Not a complicated idea. A banana problem applied to money. But Gary said there was one more layer Rex needed to understand before the simple explanation became a useful one. Printing money does not make a society richer. It redistributes purchasing power. The new meteors that the government prints take value from every meteor already in existence. Not through theft. Not through taxes. Through dilution. Rex thought about a bottle of juice. If you add water to it, the bottle is still full. But the juice is weaker. Every new meteor printed adds water to the bottle. Chapter 2. Why governments print money. Rex asked why any government would do something that makes money worth less. Gary said because sometimes the alternative is worse. When an economy collapses, businesses close and unemployment spikes. People cannot pay rent. Families cannot buy food. A government facing this situation has limited options. One option is to print money and inject it into the system. Pay workers. Fund hospitals. Keep the lights on. In the short term, this can prevent a catastrophic collapse. The 2008 financial crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic. Both times, governments and central banks created enormous amounts of new money to prevent the system from seizing up completely. Rex asked if it worked. Gary said yes and no. It prevented the immediate collapse. But the new money had consequences that showed up later. Always later. Which is why it is such a tempting tool. The benefit is immediate and visible. The cost is delayed and spread across everyone quietly. Gary said this was the most important political fact about money printing. The person who makes the decision gets the credit. The people who pay the cost often do not know who to blame. They just know that their meteor bag buys less than it did before. And nobody sends them a bill explaining why. Chapter 3. The Time Delay Problem. Rex asked why prices did not go up immediately when new money was printed. Gary said because money takes time to move through the system. When a government prints new meteors and sends them to banks, the banks do not immediately lend all of it out. When businesses receive the money, they do not immediately raise all their prices. There is a lag. Sometimes months. Sometimes years. This lag is one of the most dangerous features of money printing. It means the inflation shows up long after the decision that caused it. Politicians who print the money get the credit for solving the immediate crisis. The citizens who experience the inflation pay the price years later, often under a different government. Rex said this sounded familiar. Gary said it should. The lag also makes it very hard to know when to stop. By the time inflation is visible and measurable, the money has already been printed and is already in the system. Pulling it back requires raising interest rates, which slows borrowing, which slows the economy, which causes its own problems. There is no clean exit. Just a choice between different kinds of pain at different points in time. Rex sat with that for a moment. Gary did not rush him. Chapter 4. Not all money printing is equal. Rex had assumed that printing money always caused the same amount of inflation. Gary said that was wrong. The relationship between money printing and inflation depends on several factors. The first is how much the economy is actually producing. If an economy has idle capacity, unemployed workers, empty factories, and used resources, then new money can stimulate production rather than just chasing the same goods. More money plus more goods means less inflation than more money plus the same goods. This is why some economists argue that money printing during a severe recession does not necessarily cause runaway inflation. Because the new money gets absorbed by new economic activity. The second factor is how fast the money circulates. Economists call this the velocity of money. If people receive new money and immediately spend it, velocity is high and inflation comes faster. If people receive new money and save it or pay down debt, velocity stays low and inflation is slower. During the COVID pandemic, much of the printed money went into savings accounts and financial assets rather than immediately into consumer spending. This delayed the inflation effect. Then when supply chains broke down and people started spending their savings simultaneously, inflation arrived suddenly and hard. Rex realized the timing of the banana flood mattered as much as the size of it. The third factor is whether the rest of the world trusts your currency. Some currencies, like the US dollar, are used globally for trade and held in reserve by foreign governments. This means demand for dollars exists far beyond the borders of the United States. When the US prints more dollars, some of that extra supply gets absorbed by global demand rather than immediately pushing up domestic prices. Countries whose currencies are not globally trusted do not have this buffer. When they print, inflation shows up faster and harder. Rex thought about the countries from previous stories. About currencies that collapsed while the dollar stayed stable. This was part of the reason why. Chapter 5. When it goes wrong. Rex asked Gary what happened when governments printed too much for too long. Gary said look at history. The examples were not subtle. Weimar Germany in the 1920s. The government printed money to pay war debts. Prices doubled every few days. People carried money in wheelbarrows to buy bread. The wheelbarrow was worth more than the money inside it. Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Inflation reached millions of % annually. The government printed $100 trillion notes that could not buy a loaf of bread. Venezuela more recently. Chronic money printing to cover government spending destroyed the currency over years. Ordinary people lost their savings not because anyone stole them but because the meteors in their bags quietly became worth almost nothing. In all these cases, the government did not intend to destroy the currency. Each individual decision to print seemed manageable. The cumulative effect was catastrophic. Rex thought about the meteor cave from a previous story. The Central Meteor Authority. He understood now what happened when that cave ran the printing machine too long without stopping. It was not the decision to print that destroyed the currency. It was the inability to stop. Gary said this was the real danger. Not the first meteor printed. The 10,000th. The millionth. The point at which the printing machine became the only tool the government knew how to use. Chapter 6. The hidden tax nobody voted for. Rex asked Gary if there was a name for what inflation did to ordinary dinosaurs. Gary said some economists called it the inflation tax. When the government prints money and spends it, it effectively transfers purchasing power from everyone who holds existing money to whoever receives the new money first. The government and the first recipients of newly printed money can buy goods at current prices. By the time the money filters through the economy and prices adjust upward, ordinary dinosaurs are paying the higher prices with the same salary they had before. They did not vote for this. No meteor was taken from their bag directly. But their bag buys less. That is a tax. It just does not look like one. Rex thought about the salary video. About raises that do not keep up with inflation. About the purchasing power that quietly erodes year after year. He realized printing money and inflation were connected directly to every economic story they had discussed before. They were not separate topics. They were the same system viewed from different angles. Chapter 7. What Rex can actually do. Rex asked what an ordinary dinosaur was supposed to do about this. Gary said the first thing was understanding that cash loses value during inflation. Keeping all your meteors in a bag under the bed while the government prints new ones is a guaranteed way to get poorer without spending a single meteor. Assets that hold or gain value during inflation matter. Property. Productive businesses. Commodities. These tend to keep pace with or outrun inflation in ways that cash does not. The second thing is understanding that debt with a fixed interest rate actually becomes cheaper during inflation. If Rex owes 1,000 meteors and inflation runs high, the real value of what he owes shrinks over time even if the number stays the same. This is why governments with large debts sometimes have complicated feelings about moderate inflation. The third thing is paying attention to what central banks are signaling about interest rates. When central banks raise rates to fight inflation, borrowing becomes more expensive and asset prices often fall. When they cut rates, borrowing becomes cheaper and asset prices often rise. Rex could not control any of this. But he could understand the cycle well enough to make decisions that were not based on panic or ignorance. Gary stood up from the rock. He told Rex that printing money was not magic. It was not free. Somebody always paid. The question was just who, and when, and whether they knew it was happening. Rex looked at his meteor bag. He thought about the printing machine in the cave. He thought about all the meteors already in circulation. Billions of them. Trillions of them. Each new one diluting every existing one by a fraction so small it was invisible on any given day. And for the first time, he understood why the price of everything seemed to go up even when nobody changed the price signs. Gary picked up his banana. Rex noticed it cost 4 meteors now. Last year it cost 1. Nobody had made the banana more expensive. They had just made the meteors worth less. Gary took a bite. Rex sat quietly for a long time after that.